Hey, hey,
Hey, Andrew.
how goes it?
It's going well. How about yourself?
Great. Oh, crap, I forgot. I gotta put my bird away.
Mm,
Give me 1 second, or we're gonna have a lot of
sure.
screams during this thing. A lot of screeching. Okay. Alright.
I hope you don't mind me chomping on some food for a little bit.
Not at all. I got my tea as well.
Mhm.
Alright, you ready to get started?
Yeah, let's do it.
Sweet. So I want to start off with agenda. So first thing, or the whole scope of what I want to cover. There are a few things you mentioned in your check-in. The applying the concepts from the enrollment process to the organizers. We'll definitely go over that. Getting the conversation started with people you don't know or haven't spoken with in a long time. I could see that being something we can discuss in a short amount of time or a much longer period. So I would suggest we put that towards the end and then go for however long we need, you know?
Mhm.
Let's see. I'd like to do a quick overview of your goals and your 3 gig conversations.
Mhm.
And then prep some next assignments for you based on what we discussed, what we think is the right next steps for you.
Yeah.
Sound good?
Yeah, it sounds great.
Cool. All right. So let's start with the goals. Just to remind us of everything. I looked over them. They look good. The minimum goal for the next 3 months, reaching out to at least 10 organizers in different cities, turning at least 3 into interested leads, confirming 1 workshop, right? I would say all good. I think if we had to narrow it down, let's make sure it's confirm that workshop, right? If we need it to be more organizers or something, let's get you a workshop. Does that make
Mhm.
sense?
Mhm. Sure.
Um, Dream goal, teaching US-based weekend workshops 1 to 2 per month, touring Europe 2 to 3 times per year. All looks good. The only thing that I thought was a little bit weird was you mentioned a workshop is defined as greater than 4 hours of teaching within a 7-day period. And that seems like you might be selling yourself short. Like 5 hours counts as a workshop, even if it's spread out over 7 days. Like, and my suggestion is, could we make that like, okay, that's a minimum, but a standard that we're shooting for maybe could be like 8 hours over 2 days.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Let's see. You also mentioned developing a clear process for cold calling organizers getting hired. We can definitely do that. Sidestepping pitfalls and other ways to spend time less effectively. We'll definitely be doing that. Refining your marketing so it paints a clear picture of your strengths and what you offer. We'll definitely be doing that. Successfully getting hired for X events and Y months. I think the number was either 3 or 4 over a year was like, okay, seeing that you have that, yes, in the next year I'm going to get hired for, I think it was 4. Does that sound right to you? 3, 4?
I'm really trying to remember. I couldn't remember it all.
Right.
I think it might have been something we might have talked about like 4 initially, but you were really concerned about defining a super long time window that could overcommit yourself, and so I think we had like narrowed it down to something more like a 3-month window and have like 2 workshops or something like that
Mm-hmm.
to getting them to confirmed.
And yeah, so my concern was like having a huge time frame. Sure, I like the idea of in the next 3 months or something like that, getting 2 events to say yes, I want to hire you. Um, that the only concern, I mean, I think that's doable. The only concern I'm going to express up front is how quickly we get you into action versus learning. If that makes sense. There's learning stuff and then there's actually putting it into action. So like, as long as we can, I think we can do them kind of simultaneously. But that is one thing we'll need to be aware of is, 3 months from the point where you understand what you need to do. I don't think that's unreasonable. 3 months from right now, probably still done. We need to pay attention to getting you into action.
Mm-hmm.
Make sense?
Yep, that makes sense.
Cool. All right, so I'm going to put that 2 events in 3 months, just so we have it. Okay, so let's go over the gig conversations. And I don't know if you want to look at them to remind you. Like, do you have Coach Accountable open right now?
I'm pulling it up as we speak.
Cool. If you go to your...
And you want me to look at the enrollment
files.
process sheet?
No, go to the files section for those 3 gig conversations that you had, like...
Oh, yeah. Okay,
right?
Got it.
Cool. So in your files, the first one that the organizer Miss Cologne, I think it's actually the last one in there. Yep. The main thing I noticed is that you gave yourself, I think, 3 or 4 months to prepare instead of 6. And my recommendation is to give yourself at least 6 months for your first set of rounds. And I don't know if this was your first set, but I usually look at it like 6 months ahead is when I'm trying to get a few gigs to solidify and say, yes, I'm definitely going. And then I can still get other gigs in 3 or 4 months ahead of time, even 1 or 2 months for smaller gigs. But they're like filling in the gaps rather than being like the ones I need to make it worthwhile. Does that make sense?
Sure. Yeah.
And that gives me time to do all of that.
Yep.
Everything else looked good. Obviously the timing won't always work like with some organizers, right? So that's why you want to have more contacts to contact. Looking at the China one, again, I thought you handled it very well. It's hard to tell much without seeing an actual proposal on that. You never got to the stage where you're in proposals, but I think what you did there was good. I think having someone else organize things for you is nice, although it does tend to happen like that when you don't contact each individual organizer, is like you're putting yourself in their hands, So I guess one thing could be if you could ask that person that is doing that, like, coordination, like, could you also CC me or include me in the conversations that you're having, so that I can see what's going on and I can input my thoughts.
Yep.
Yeah. For the engagement, the success one in Oxford, again, just more notice, right? Giving 6 months notice is good. But then I'd guide them a little bit more as well in the process. So, I mean, one example is the enrollment conversation you could have with them where you get on the phone and actually ask them a whole bunch of questions around their goals and try to figure out, like, what do they want and design something for them. And it also just gets them really excited about it, right?
Right.
Which is huge. That's a big part. The other thing that I would do is give them examples of the monetary end as well. And we'll break this down more specifically later, but just a general concept is saying, I recommend, here's how much it costs for me. I recommend charging this amount, so you need this number of people to break even. So that they see immediately, like, oh, I need 10 people to break even, right? That was usually, when I first started traveling, that was my goal, was set everything up in a way that they need 10 people to break even. because most people, I can get 10.
How did you factor in stuff like rent costs? Like, how were you able to localize that data?
I'd just give them a stock number that I'd say, for this purposes, look for something that costs under $500. And if you do that, here it is. Obviously, if numbers change, then the numbers to break even change, but that gives them a general idea. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and then I think we'll cover this a little bit more when we go over the enrollment process, but like think about what their problem is and how you can help them with it. So I think I remember seeing in the Oxford one you mentioned like, can they get enough people to make it worthwhile? Like, if they can't, then you're like, I always go, okay, that's your problem. I'm going to solve it for you. And I help them with that piece of it, right? So I'm always looking for what are the things that they're struggling with and how do I just solve that problem for them so it's no longer an issue. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. And if you were in that situation, what would you offer?
I mean, in this specific scenario, I don't think they mentioned the problem. I think you mentioned it. Right? Is that accurate? Let me pull up. But, well, regardless, let me just answer the question, even if it is, let's say you're in an enrollment conversation or any time someone says, one of the things we're really stressed about is getting enough people to make it work. Right? And so, I mean, breaking it down numbers-wise is one thing, but then maybe they say, I don't even think we can get 10 people, right? And I might say, okay, well, one of the things I'm going to do within my program for you is actually show you, I'm going to send you the emails to send out to get people enticed to come so that you know how to inspire more people to come to your workshop, right? So that might be the problem. If they have people, it depends on the problem. That solves the problem. They have lots of people in their scene, but people aren't coming to workshops, right? I'm actually going to give you some stock emails to send out to them to inspire them to come, and then those emails, like, if you remember the Fusion Exchange, like, we didn't just send, like, one email that told them everything. We'd send, like, little updates here and there, right? And that's the general idea. If you want people to come, is you need to message them multiple times. But you can't just message them the same thing every time. That's going to piss them off, right? But if it's every time it's some new information, it's like, oh, glad to know that. Okay. And then they can choose to sign up then, but most likely they're going to wait until another time, and then eventually they see it and they go, okay, I want to sign up. So, and we can dive a lot deeper into that if that's something specific that we decide to go into, but I wanted to give you the idea, like, no matter what, like, think I need to be a problem solver for these people, and that will dramatically increase the amount of people that hire you. Okay, I think that's the only things I wanted to mention within those conversations. I need more detail to really dive in, but that's what you got, so that works.
Yeah.
Let's go over the enrollment process. So if you go to your worksheet, there it is. And I guess the first thing is, like, what do you think of this process? Like, do you like it? Are you going, oh yeah, I see the steps and I see how this can be helpful towards getting someone to actually hire me? Or I see a nod.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. I think it works well in getting a person more interested in, like, the vision of a thing rather than thinking about just like, oh, I need to hire a person to do a workshop, which is, it totally makes sense of why that's effective. And I think most of the steps feel really good and sensible. It's like stuff that is yeah, it aligns. It makes sense.
Cool. Let's see. I will say, like, eventually, this enrollment process can be condensed and done quicker and things like that. But when you first start out, I would recommend following it pretty precisely.
Sure.
And let's see. So as we go through it, I'd like you to be thinking about, okay, what parts am I not sure how to make it work for organizers?
Mm-hmm.
So just mentioning that now, I'll also come back and ask that question again after we go through the whole thing.
Okay? Sure.
All right, so let's scroll down to past your. We're only going to be looking mainly at your responses. So we can skip your first response. Yes, I'll take imperfect action. Going down to the section where you mentioned what you're strong at, what you're neutral at, and what you're weak at.
Mm-hmm.
So looking at what you're weak at, numbers 1, 3, 5, and 6, if I were to say like what to make sure to improve in and make sure you're not weak in, it's number 3, closing that gap. And the way that you do that and is based on how you create your program, right? So imagine that someone says, you know, their biggest struggles are getting their dancers to become good enough that they want to dance with them, right? Let's say that's the thing. I want them good enough to dance with them. Then the program title itself is something along the lines of your students are amazing, or you want to dance with your students, right? That's how you're framing it to them, not to the students, but to them, the organizer, right? And then you want to talk about every class that you teach, like you give like a 1-bullet description or a short description of it and how it affects the specific goal that they have of wanting to dance with them, right? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of the closing the gap area, but also when you're establishing the gap, you want to ask deeper questions to find out a little bit more, like about, like, for example, let's say they want that specific thing of wanting to dance with their students or loving dancing with their students, and you go, okay, why don't you? Right? And then they say, well, their musicality is not that great. Great. Okay, musicality is one thing. Oh, their connection's not great. Great. Connection's another thing. You get a list of things. And then if there's not enough things, you might dive deeper into those things and say, okay, tell me more about musicality. What about musicality is it? Is it that they're off rhythm? Is it that they're like not matching the feeling of the song? You know, and most likely it's all of these things. And this gives you a list of things that they've now told you they want help with. Right? So your classes can be designed around that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does.
Cool. I mean, number 5, helping the students continue, is probably the second most important thing as far as like getting workshops booked, right? So signing them up in a way that keeps them excited. So thinking about that from the organizer perspective is like they've just agreed to hire you, right? So how do you keep them excited over the next 6 months, right? Or more likely 5, 4, 3 months, something by the time you've actually said yes and committed, right? You still want to keep them interested, right? And so that means not just dropping off the face of the earth, but actually sending them an email, checking in with them, seeing how things are going. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Is it anything more than that, aside from just saying, like, hey, I just wanted, you know, I'm like, I booked my flights, I'm really excited about it, looking forward to it. Like, do you do anything beyond that?
If I'm guiding them on how to grow the workshop, how to actually have students go in the workshop, I'm doing a lot more. So I'm actually sending them emails saying, send this email now, right? Like, and I've sent them a whole I've sent them a big picture of what they're going to be sending, and then when it's time to send, I'm reminding them to send. Um, Beyond that, it's pretty much just checking in, but not just about, also checking in to see how things are going for them, right? How's registration going? Are people feeling excited about it? Basically ask questions around whatever the last conversation you had with them was, right? And whatever the goal of that it was. So if the goal is, an example is if the goal is to get people to sign up for a survey that tells them what kind of classes they want, right? Like they're sending out a survey, tell us what kind of classes, checking in the week after and just saying, hey, have people filled it out yet? Maybe it'd be good to resend it if people hadn't filled it out. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah. Let's see. Let's scroll down to the next section. Let's see. These all make perfect sense and feel comfortable, intuitive to me. 2 and 6 are probably my weakest. Let's see. 2 is take a stand for your student. Yeah. Why do you feel that's weak for you? Or how do you... Like, let me give you the scenario of it so you can see it in an example of it, and then you tell me, like, how you could be better or where you feel you're at. So an example is when we talked, right? There are several times where I noticed things that seemed out of line with your goals, right? Like, I'm not putting in the time for it, but I have this goal, right? Or, let's just do that one, right? So I really, pointed that out, and I just said, hey, how does this work? These things don't seem to be in line, right? So do you feel like when you notice those things, you hide away from saying them, or what do you think?
Those feel pretty comfortable to talk about. I've gotten pretty good at, in a sense, coaching people through, or not really coaching, but being a sounding board for people and really reflecting back to them when I'm seeing inconsistencies and how they're thinking about a problem and helping them to kind of problem solve it on their own. I think what made me think that it was not as strong as the other pieces was something around I think it was the part about many times people will let their fears or concerns talk themselves out of what they really want, even when it's not in their best interest. Help them ask themselves the tough questions. And there's something about that it's very easy for that to come into a excuse me a place of being perceived as pushy or salesy.
Yeah.
By saying, okay, well, why don't you want to do this thing? As opposed to just accepting no as an answer, because no means no.
Yeah.
And so there's this, I'm very cautious about when I choose to push back on a person when they are saying well, this thing is, I'm not going to do this thing because of some fear that I have. And if I know the person well, then I know that there's a lot of rapport and trust that I can push back on them and be like, hey, this is inconsistent. But if I don't know the person, then I'm much less inclined to do that.
How would you feel about asking a question, it's a fear for them, they have a fear, they don't want to do this, asking a question do you think there's a way that you could do this where it didn't clash with your fear, or would you want to brainstorm a way to implement this without it clashing with your fear? I don't know if that's the exact wording, but you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, it could. I think what would give me greater freedom is just in the course of talking with a person, and I'm seeing that fear come up, and I'm feeling uncertain about pushing back, to just say, hey, I'm hearing you provide some reasons for why you're feeling uncomfortable with moving forward, and I totally respect that. And if you just want to leave it at that, that's totally fine. I'm very happy to share the thoughts that I have about how it seems that some of your concerns are not in alignment with your goals, or that they're holding you back, would you like me to share those thoughts with you, or some way to just emphasize like the buy-in from the other person that I'm continuing the conversation with them with their consent.
Yeah, I like that. Cool. Good to move on then.
Yeah, it's all just like communication.
Yeah, right. Number 6 is remembering you are providing huge value. That is a tough one for all of us. I think the one thing that I'll say for now, I think we'll be growing your confidence as you go through this and just like have better marketing, have better things going on. Part of it will come for that. And another part I want to point out is like I don't work with just anyone. I don't ask, like, you're in like a handful of people that I've asked to work with. Like Ryan Francois is someone I've talked to. Jenny Thomas is someone I've talked to. Like, there's not a huge list of people that I've talked to that I'm like, hey, I want to work one-on-one with you. So I don't know if that helps you, but know that I think of you as an amazing person, great dancer, and I don't know your teaching yet, but I have the feeling that your teaching either is already awesome or has the potential to be amazing.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I think it's clear to me the value that I bring in having a conversation like this with somebody when they're a student, and I can be a little bit more clear about like, these are some of the things that are holding you back. Here's like their next steps. Like, it's super obvious. It's not as evident to me when I'm talking to an organizer and they're saying like, oh, look, I just want these, dancers to not suck. And like, it's I can definitely reason my way through it and be like, okay, so the value that I'm bringing is giving them guidance on what sorts of topics should be covered in weekly classes or in monthly classes, or what to be asking for from a workshop. But also, I feel like I'm less practiced in that realm, whereas I'm super practiced in giving feedback to students. So in a way, like what you're doing, if it were with a student, like you're kind of giving them feedback for free of like what, sort of the broad roadmap for them. But for me, I'm less established in doing that for organizers. So I think that's part of it, is like I don't have as many data points of seeing this does bring value. And so that's why I feel less certain of it.
Gotcha. Brings up one thing you might want to do is, and this is a little bit more of a long-term strategy, but a really good one to do is do what we call niche interviews or niche interviews, where you reach out to organizers purely to get them to say, to share with you what their struggles are and what their challenges are, because you want to see if you can help, right? And so you interview a bunch of people, get their struggles and challenges. You can even put it into a document that lets people know the biggest struggles and document things, and then maybe even provide some advice on those struggles, not in the interview, but possibly later. That could be something that you're saying you're going to do for them, is once I have once I've interviewed 10 organizers, I'm then going to try to give advice on this, and whether that be advice straight from you, or whether that be because you then do the research for it and ask, other people what they've done. But it gives you a chance to really get to feel like, okay, what are the organizer struggles? What language do they use? And just getting comfortable talking with them. Does that make sense? I do have a training on that would walk you through like how to do that. I'm not sure if it's like the thing to do right away or not. But I'm going to put it down as something to think about. Niche interviews. This is to get you comfortable, solving organizers' problems. Does that make sense? How does that sound for you? Is that like, oh yeah, I'd want to do that? Or
Mm, if it were a free resource, I would be very interested to look it over. If it costs something, then like I'm probably have enough
it'd be within
training.
our program. It'd be within anything I talk to you about over this time period will be something within our program.
I see. Okay.
So yeah, I'm not.
Yeah, I mean, like I always like, I always like seeing more, getting more perspectives on things. Like I think that I'm fairly practiced at doing interviews because I have gone through some design thinking courses. Are you familiar with design thinking? Yeah, it comes out of out of Stanford. There's a school called the Design School, and it's all about doing user interviews to really get at building empathy for them and their needs and doing need finding rather than coming to them with a product and saying, is this useful to you? You like go to them and do deep dive into their world and then come up with solutions for it. So like a lot of, work and learning from that, like I think I would be pretty solid at it. But that said, like I would be delighted to be able to just read it over like one evening, just kind of see what you have to share about it.
Okay. What I can do is add it. Like I want to one of the things I worry about is overwhelming people with too much things. So I'm just saying that out loud because it's my fear. We're nowhere near that stage yet. So I'd say what I'm going to do is I'll give you that worksheet and I'll like schedule it to be due like a year from now. So there's no like it needs to be done right away type thing. And if we decide at some point, yes, it needs to be done, we can change the date that it's due. Sound good?
Sounds good.
Add it due 1 year from now.
Yeah, I have a pretty high tolerance, so I don't think it'll come up where I'm getting overwhelmed by what you have to offer me, but we'll see.
Okay. Well, and it's not just overwhelmed, but it's also getting you to the goal quickly.
Yep,
right?
Totally.
As opposed to things that will distract from the goal.
Yep.
Right? And
yeah,
I don't know that you need that interview to hit your goal.
Yep.
Let's see. Oh, back to the enrollment process. Let's scroll down to the next section where you say the one about how often would you want to be asked by what type of dancer really struck a chord with me. Do you remember that?
Oh, that was just me modeling a fake conversation with a person.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
I think. Nope, yeah. I'm wrong. I was misreading it.
Okay.
I think it was. What I liked about it was that it's a very tangible way of thinking about progression in one's dance.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, like these days, I don't really think about that anymore because I could dance with pretty much anybody as long as it's within the scenes that I know.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember, being a newer dancer and being like, oh, I want to dance with those people, or I just want to have great dances with everybody, Right. So I was like, oh yeah, like I've forgotten those questions, but they are very salient for a lot of people.
Yeah.
I think that it'd be kind of cool to brainstorm those kinds of questions for organizers, because like the one about like, oh, I want the dancers to be fun or to be fun to dance with is like cool, but I could not generate nearly as long of a list for what organizers might be dreaming of. And specifically like things that they can dream of that are relevant to me. So like they may dream of like, oh, I want to have a 200-person weekly event. Mm-hmm. And that sounds great, and teaching will be a part of that, but there's a whole lot around it that is not something that I offer.
Sure. Yeah, one thing that brings up that I wanted to mention is even if they have a goal that maybe you don't, like what you do isn't going to get them to that goal, if it clearly moves them along the path a little bit, then it can be included in your program.
Mm-hmm.
So like an example is like they want to hold workshops that are sold out. Right? Like they want your workshop to be sold out, not just have like 10 people. You can be like, well, the emails that I'm going to give you are going to help with that. Right? They're not going to necessarily get them to sold out because there's probably 10 other things they need to do as well. But here's one thing that's going to help with that. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, let's put going over these questions and brainstorming how to do them. Well, let me ask you this. Is this a homework item for you where we say, I want you to go and just literally copy paste those questions and then try to turn each one into an organizer one. And then with the ones that you can't figure out how to turn it into it, you like email me that.
Sounds fine to me.
Okay, let's do that. Let's add that as an action. You're in Coach Accountable right now, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to have you create an action. So if you click the little green plus button next to the actions.
Yep.
And then title it in a way that you will remember what that is, right?
Okay.
Yeah, and the questions, if you need to know the number, it's in 2.1.
Yep.
Is where all those questions are. Cool. And then due date, definitely by our next one, but
cool.
Your call, I would say not more than 2 weeks.
Yeah, I'll just say like the 30th. Probably call it good with that.
Okay. You don't need a project. Do you want reminders?
No.
Okay, you can delete the reminder that's already in there.
Yep.
By clicking the trash. Do you want it to send you a notice?
No.
Nope.
To be honest, I went through the rest of the menu and just created it.
Oh, you're done? Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Awesome. Let's see. Let's go on to the next section. Thanks so much for sharing those thoughts with me. Oh, this is just you repeating what they said. Okay, we can skip that. That looked good. Going down. What do you think about this section on establishing the gap? You shared one of the key pieces in all this is have them talk first. Absolutely. Allow them to explore the answers to those questions and provide input. Doing it in this order helps make it feel more guidance. Absolutely. Like, the more you can just ask questions, the better, right?
Yep.
What's also interesting is there's a lot in the realm of they don't know what they're... Oh, right. Yeah. So if people don't know what they're missing, like, sometimes it doesn't matter, but if you really feel like there's, like, you need more things for them to want to hire you, and, like, it's like you haven't given them enough things, like, then one of the things is just to bring up some of the things they might be missing, right? And just say...
Sorry, give me 1 sec here. Okay, I'm back.
Cool. So when you're dealing with someone that you're like, oh God, they just don't see what they don't, they don't know what they don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Then what I do is I ask them questions around those things rather than trying to say you don't know this. I'll ask them, do you know this? Right? Do you know how to do this? And I think there was even a point where we did this like really towards the very end of things where you were saying you just weren't sure. You're sure there's things you don't know, but you weren't sure. And I like briefly just asked like a question around something specific to see if you knew how to handle it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So that's basically what I would do there. And sometimes I have to do a bunch of that because the person really has no clue, of what they want. Like, they don't know what they want. They don't know what's missing. Like, and I just start pointing out, well, what about this? What about that? Right. So if you take the example of the person wants people to love dancing with them, right? And maybe they want their musicality to be improved, but they have no idea, right? Then I might go, well, how are their volume changes? Like, do you know if their volume changes match the volume changes in the music? And what about the energy changes? Like, do those match, or do they kind of convolute the energy with the volume and like get meshed together? And the person will usually go, oh, I didn't even know those were separate things, right? So just diving a little bit deeper into what you offer, but in a question.
Yep.
Cool.
That makes sense.
Cool. Looking at your next part, it's struggling to apply this to an organizer and their scene. Those questions seem a bit more abstract. Often what an organizer dreams about is a thriving scene with lots of people, which is only indirectly and partially answered through your workshops, right? So, like, one of the things that I do think helped me a lot is, like, when I went places, I would actually offer a class on growing your scene, right? And you are welcome to use the exact class structure I used. I could send you the class outline that I did and how I prepped people with it and things like that. So I would say wait until that becomes an actual, like, oh, this is a problem. But if that's a problem, then again, solve it by going, oh, well, why don't we do a class about growing your scene? Looking at more of what you said learning dance is a key part, but there's only a whole lot else to the story of organizing. Sure. Yeah. So figuring out how I can close our gap with regard to organizing will be an interesting area to explore. I just have less intuition. So does that answer that section a little bit more for now, or?
Yeah, I think that it gives me a couple of things. I suspect that doing that action item will help with this, and then also just practicing it a few times with organizers will help surface.
Yeah. Oh, and that's the other thing I was going to say is that, was this in reference still to that section, or was this in reference to the entire document?
It was more to this section.
Okay, cool. So the rest of the document is more clear. It's just those specific questions that were the hang up as far as how it works with organizers?
Yes.
Okay. All right, let's scroll down to the next.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a general theme, but usually I mention that theme in each place.
Okay. Scrolling down to the next section, rewrite the step in your own words. That's just a rewrite, and I remember reading and saying it looked good. All your rewrites looked good. Scrolling down, write an example of how you might say this for one of your students. Again, just a rewrite. Scrolling to take the first benefit from your program and explain it as a step. Oh, this was specifically a rewrite for that step. Let me read it again.
It was just something I made up. Like, I don't really know what my program is.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that one was good. I want to go back up to the one before, because now I'm remembering. I feel like there was one that was specifically on this that I had something to say on. Oh, that's good. Oh yeah, no. Everything so far is good. Scrolling down, 3.4, offer to share your solution. I've taught other workshops in the past that focused on playfulness. Would you like to share those, how those have gone? Oh yeah, this one. This is the one. So the call to action in this step is to share the program as opposed to a success story.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that I'm reading it, it's more about sharing a success story. Is that right?
Oh, I see how it could have been read that way. Yeah, I wasn't trying to do it. I was trying to say like, trying to connect to it existing, and then to say this is what that program would look like.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, I'm sure it will come across when you word it. It's just, yeah. Okay, let's move on. Second benefit. What questions do you have about my classes on solo by proving that? Yeah, so asking them what questions they have around it is probably more detail than you need, as opposed to like just saying, do you see how this solo body mechanics is going to help them improve their partner dancing? Right? Or whatever, if that's the goal, right? The goal might be to make you love dancing with them, right? Do you see how that solo body mechanics class is going to help you love dancing with them? Assuming, again, we've broken it down in a way that discusses that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I and that was my first inclination, but I've also been doing some work around not in trying to engage with people, not asking yes or no questions, because people are much more likely to just opt out in the path of least resistance. So I've been trying to frame a lot of the questions that I have, especially with regard to questions, is like, what questions are there, or
maybe what benefits,
stuff like that.
Maybe what benefits might be a better way if you want to ask it like that, so that it's more directly in line with like, what benefits do you see, this class, what impact do you see this class having on your loving their dancing, or something like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. And the other thing, though, is to listen, even if you do ask a yes or no question, listen for the emphasis, right? Because you can tell if someone's like, yeah, or if they're like, yeah, right? So if you hear like a kind of a wavering one, then just ask. It sounded like a kind of hesitant yes. Are we sure on that? Or,
Sure.
Cool. All right, let's move on. Rewrite the 2 questions above and looking at my proposal, what stands out to you and how it could achieve your goal of cultivating better dancers in your scene. Yep, that's good. Someone came to you, offered to wave a magic wand and have your desired outcome realized, what would that be worth to you? Yep, that one was good. Scrolling down. To one of the ways I focus on playfulness is through letting go of judgment over failure. Oh, right. So with this one, you mentioned how fascinating exercise that works in any context. There was one scene for which it especially resonated. It was so cool to return regularly over the next cool years and see how that exercise was still being practiced and the impact it had on the community's treatment of learning and improvement. Right? So just instead of saying in the impact it had, like describe the impact, right? Say, and seeing, letting go of judgment over failure, like seeing how they were willing to fail and still have an awesome dance, right?
Okay.
Cool. And that's going to be, I think, a theme you'll see coming back consistently is be more precise with your language, be more descriptive with what the goal is. Yeah. Let's see. So
be more concrete.
Yeah, like I hear so many times when people say, I'm teaching this, musicality class to, like in the example earlier, volume changes versus energy changes so that you can improve your musicality. But every single musicality class improves your musicality. So, like, instead, just saying, like, so that you can match your volume versus your energy and not mix them, right, like is way more descriptive. Like, and that was a really horrid, like quick description. I would be way more precise so that they know what I'm talking about. But the idea is like, yeah, you can't say like saying so it improves your musicality or so that it improves your dancing or something like that is way too broad when you're giving a exact example.
Okay.
Cool. The next section looks good, so every scene is different. That was good. You'll have pricing written down on your program. Going to rewriting the investment. So we can either go with a flat rate of 1,000 or you can go with guaranteed minimum 500 to cover expenses, and then we split 70-30 profit or
whatever.
Yeah.
Just making numbers up.
That's good. The one thing I want to point out that I would recommend doing that's slightly different, I'm not sure if you're doing it or not, is, and you don't need to explain this in this moment in the conversation with them, but like to be clear that profit means after you get paid versus before. So like a lot of people will be like, I get guaranteed 500 or 70-30 of the profit. And then like $1,000 comes in, they had $500 or say $100 in expenses, and now there's $900 in profit. And they go, okay, 70-30 of that is a little under $700 and give you $700, right? Versus going $100 goes to the rent, $500 goes to you, and now we have $400, 70-30 of that, 70 goes to you. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah, so treat your expense as an expense. Do you already do that? Okay, cool. No questions. Scrolling down, rewrite this.
Actually, I did have one question, which was have you done profit sharing like that before, and what are the ratios that you've found that work well?
Yeah. When I very first started, I had an $800 minimum, and $1,500 was my flat rate, and 50-50 was my split. Right. And 800 covered all expenses, covered my travel, whatever it was. Like sometimes I might increase it if it was going to Europe and I was a little bit nervous about like needing to hit numbers or something like that. I might go to like $1,000 or $950, or I think $950 was my norm. Kept it under $1,000. But so that was when I first started. Like literally, like I was a brand new teacher traveling the world teaching dance. Once I became more established, it went up to 2,000 minimum, and I mean, what was my? And 3,000 was flat rate, and still 50-50. I like 50-50. Personally, I don't want to make it sound like I'm more valuable than them or one way or the other.
Sure.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing those numbers. That's helpful.
Yeah. Let's see. Scrolling down. I won't be offering a discount for the reasons we discussed over video chat. Glad that you remind me of that. Like I remember that in this case, but sometimes I won't remember that stuff just because I'm working with different people. So it's good that you mentioned that. At the same time, anytime you come across something, I would still do it as a practice, right? Just in general, just be like, okay, this is how I would say it if I were to do it. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Cool.
Yeah, I can do that.
Cool. Scrolling down, what do you think about this section? Closing the gap, share any thoughts, favorite parts. I'd be very interested to explore how this translates, right? Which we're already doing. And that's it.
Yep.
Cool. All right. Any questions on this?
No, not on this.
All right. Let's move on to, let's see. So, still on the things to talk about, getting the conversation started with people you don't know or haven't spoken with. Also, I'd like to give you a general big picture for like running workshops and things like that. And then I think the next thing that I want to do is have you build what we call the customer journey, so that we can see your customer journey. But I have a few questions for you around that to know what's most important for you.
Sure.
So quick questions. How many contacts do you have in total that are organizers? If you were to just guess right now, is this like 10, 20, 50, 100?
I could probably find 20 immediately, and I could probably find 50 with like a little bit of like, I know a person in the city, and then they could put me in touch with the right person.
Gotcha. 50 in touch. 20 immediately, 50 in touch. And that's worldwide?
That's worldwide.
Okay.
And those might be conservative, but...
Sure. And then, do you have them all in one place? It sounds like you don't. Okay.
It's scattered. I have them across Facebook lists and some in like my Gmail contacts. And I'm looking at some CRMs to be able to actually more properly keep track of some of this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's going to be a good step. If you're looking for a free one, I guess I'd probably recommend MailChimp. MailChimp.com. If you're willing to pay like $7 a month or something like that, which is what I would recommend, definitely eventually going to is a paid program, and the one I recommend is ActiveCampaign. ActiveCampaign has a ton of amazing things that you can do with it that technically MailChimp has too, but when you want to use those services with MailChimp, you have to pay a lot more.
So my understanding is that MailChimp, ActiveCampaign, they're more for contact management, like as far as like actually communication management, right? Writing newsletters, sending out emails to groups of people. But I was talking about an actual CRM to keep track of the last touch that I had on a person and when I need to follow up with them next and all of that.
Yeah, you can still do that through definitely through ActiveCampaign. I'm not as familiar with MailChimp just because I don't use their paid one. So if you're talking about pipelines and things like that, that is a slightly more expensive version of ActiveCampaign, still pretty reasonable compared to other things. Like, to give you a comparison, I pay $300 a month or $280 a month for Infusionsoft, which has got everything, and ActiveCampaign pretty much has all that stuff for $7 a month. But you only have a certain amount of contacts, like I think 1,000 contacts or 500 contacts or something like that. But when you're first starting out, you don't need that many. And when you scale bigger, you'll be able to afford a slightly higher payment.
Sure.
But yeah, so like there's this thing called a pipeline, which is what you're describing as like knowing what stage of the process they're in. I don't know any super cheap or free versions of that, like a spreadsheet works. But ActiveCampaign has a way to kind of do that in that you can tag people. So you can say like, all these people are in this stage of the sequence, right? And these people are in this stage of the sequence. So you can quickly find the stage that they're in, and then you can take notes on your last conversation with them and all that kind of stuff. It's not quite as perfect as a pipeline, but it works like a pipeline.
Sure. Cool.
So yeah,
I think for starters, like I'm just building out a simple spreadsheet because I'm tired of putting it into things that I lose control over. Right. The spreadsheet, I can just manipulate data as I want.
Yep. That's easy. That's what I started with as well. So looking at the number of contacts, 20 immediately, 50 in touch, Also, the other thing you want to do is segment them based on location, right? Because like if you're doing a Europe tour like for a month, ideally you want 20 contacts to reach out to have 10 of them. Like if I give you the big picture, it's usually I'm going here for these months, which you did do in one, right? You said the months that you were looking for, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you give them a lot of notice. And then
Mm-hmm.
out of those 20 people, let's say 20 minimum, ideally, that are all in that region that you're going to, maybe 10 will get back to you, or 7, probably more likely. 7 will get back saying, oh, yeah, those dates work for me. Let's talk more.
Sure.
Right. And out of those 7, 3 of them will book or something like that. Or maybe 2 or something. And then you have your gig booked, and now you can go back to the other ones that haven't booked and say, here's the dates that are still open. Right. Yep. And reiterate through them,
Yep.
Get smaller gigs.
Yep.
The other thing that I want to point out as far as like the strategy, like big picture, is you also probably want to have a strategy for getting them to raise their hand and say, I want you to contact me. Right? Like, so if you think about it, like, how much detail do I want to go into? Actually, I'm going to come back to this in a little bit. I want to go on to the getting the conversation started part, and then we'll come back to this if we feel it's needed.
Yep.
Let me just move this down real quick. Okay, so getting the conversation started with people who don't know or haven't spoke with in a long time, especially when you're not in person, right? The first thing actually does coincide with what I was about to say is you want to get their permission. Like, do you have, out of those 20 contacts, do you already have their permission specifically to contact them when you're going to do a tour in their town?
There's like permission that's sort of implicit consent of I've worked with them previously, and so presumably that would be a safe bet. I'm not sure what the breakdown would be of like ratio of people that I've worked with previously versus I've never worked with before.
Yeah. So that is definitely something that you want to, like, when you're listing it out, is to go, who do I have permission for? Who do I not have permission for yet? Right? And think of it like this timeline of, here's a raving fan that's hiring me every year, right?
Mm-hmm.
Here's someone that has hired me once. Here's someone that hasn't hired me but that has said, I'm interested in hiring you.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Here's someone that said, I'm interested in being on your list. I don't know if I want to hire you yet or not, but let me know when you're in town. Right? Here's people that I haven't even gotten permission to be on the list yet.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so then you want to have a strategy like for getting someone to go from each stage. Does that make sense?
Yep.
And so for those who already know you, it's probably as simple as just sending them an email saying, hey, would you like me to contact you in the future when I'm coming through your town?
Mm-hmm.
With people that don't know you, it's a lot easier to get a yes if you offer something like free tips on something they're struggling with, right? And this is a little bit more of a long-term thing, I would say, but like if you do those niche interviews, you'll have an idea of like, what's the common biggest struggle, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you can design emails that go out to them that help them with that struggle on an occasional basis, right? And keeps you in front of them, reminds you like, oh yeah, there's this person that like I want to hire someday, but I haven't gotten around to it yet. And so when you do contact them, it's not so random. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And of course you can offer that to your current list as well, right? Like you can offer them, I would probably do it. I don't know. like you could do it one of two ways. You could do it where they have the choice of, hey, do you want to be put on my organizer list? Also, I send out free tips every once in a while and kind of combine it. Or like, and I also have some free tips. Do you want those as well? You can choose, to get the free tips or not get the free tips. Personally, I'd probably try to lump them because I'd rather have people getting that free information and remembering who I am rather than separating it out. But I could see someone being like, oh, I don't really want free tips or something like that. Maybe, yeah. So let's think about like, what could you do if you haven't spoken to someone in a long time? Like, what's the thing that you can do to get them on that list? Like, is it as simple as just reaching out to them and just saying, hey, like, I'm trying to get more organized, and know which organizers want to hire me and which ones don't. Not asking for you to hire me now, just asking, would you like to be on my list so that when I'm doing a tour in your town, or your state, country, whatever it is, that I contact you beforehand and see if you're interested.
Sure. Yeah, I like that wording.
Cool. And we are at, let's say, we started at 6:30, 1 hour and 7 minutes into this conversation, in case you want to go back to the recording and
cool.
And listen to it if you didn't get it exactly.
Sure.
Cool. Let's see. Yeah, so I mean, does that handle the getting the conversation started problem?
It does for getting them onto the list, but then I think there's, and that's going to be easy, especially for people that I know me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we've had some sort of contact, and like that's probably most people. But then there will probably be people that I've never been introduced before, where like that kind of cold call still seems less clear to me.
Yeah. Okay. So
like how to open up with that.
Yeah. I'm sure I could probably find the exact email that I sent people. Let me add that as an action to see if I can. Andrew, find exact email sent to organizers I don't know. So I can probably show you an example, and my example did worked really well. Like when I went to Australia, that was probably my most successful tour, and it was the one where I knew the least people. But I just was really adamant about looking for things. So I'm going to add that as an action for me. Oops. Andrew. That's weird. So if you see an action in your Coach Accountable account that has Andrew first, it'll even be in my prod. Oh, wait. I'm going to put Sutton.
It works for me.
Sutton. So if you see Sutton in something, that's my action. You don't need to worry about that.
Cool. Good stuff.
And I usually try to, just know, like sometimes there's no way for me to block you from getting certain messages on it. Like I can block you from getting reminders, but if it's overdue, I can't block that.
I won't worry about it.
Okay. Yeah. Just ignore it if that's the case. Let's see. So, but let's talk about this because I've gotten a lot better at this since I wrote that email. I've got a lot more ideas on how to get this. So if you're contacting someone that, is in a different state, like especially different country, but even different state, the first thing to recognize is that you're a traveling instructor. So already like there's a little bit of interest. right? I mean, I'm sure there's some people that are overwhelmed with people, not so much in the fusion scene though, right? And we are looking for fusion, or are we looking for Lindy Hop or what?
Blues and fusion.
Blues and fusion.
Yeah, I don't really actively market myself in Lindy. Like, there's some people who hire me for it, but
sure. I would guess that the fusion scene will be a little bit easier than the blues scene, in that it's still pretty untapped. But I would imagine the blues scene is not going to be that hard either. It really depends on how many instructors do they have coming in already, right? If they've got a ton of people coming in, it's a little bit harder. You're going to have to build your reputation. If they don't have a bunch, they're just excited to get somebody contacting them.
Sure.
Right? They're just, wow, someone from out of town's coming. Woohoo! Right? So that, as far as I know, they're like, I mean, you could try to gut call that or something, but I just basically contact everyone and find out after I contact them where they're at. They'll let me know if they're interested or not. And the way that I contact them, I start by making sure they know why, like how I'm connecting with them. So it might be, like I found them online. Like I just did a Google search for fusion dancing in Spain, and I came across your website. Right? So I would start with that, right? Because immediately they recognize this isn't spam. This is like specific to me, right? So you start with that, and then you go into like what's the goal? Like, don't beat around the bush. Like in this case, it's someone that doesn't know you, so your goal isn't to get hired, right? It's just to see if they ever would be interested in hiring you sometime in the future, right? Like, or even better word, it would be to build a relationship. Like, this isn't what you would say to them, but in your mind, it's building a relationship to see if they want to hire you.
Sure.
Right. So I would get straight to the point and say, I'm looking to come out. I'm planning a tour. Like, I don't give dates or anything like that. Like, you could even say, I'm planning a tour sometime in the next year or so. Like, keep it broader. And I'm just looking for organizers that might be interested. I know it's way too early for, you don't know who I am right now. I know it's way too early for us to even discuss, like, getting hired, right? I'm just wondering, like, would you be interested in learning a little bit more about me and joining my free tips list if you have a free tips list? It needs to be worded better than that. Like, it needs to be worded around their struggle, right? But the general idea, like, interested in getting some advice on. Actually, even better would be to send them to a blog post that you already created that explains and helps them through one of their biggest struggles, right? And so you're saying, if you're interested in learning a little bit more about how I can help with this specific thing, check this out. I would give them a link to some of my classes so that they can see class descriptions of the things that, like, are really enticing. Or I might even include it in a PS in the bottom of the email, right? Like, but the idea here is to just get them to go, this guy sounds interesting. I want to know more.
Yep.
Right. Yeah. So based on that right now, like, do you feel like you could write an email to the point where you could be like, okay, I got it, send it to me, and I could check it and give you advice on it?
Yeah, I could probably try that out.
Okay. Let's go ahead and create an action for that. And by let's, I mean you. If that wasn't obvious.
Sorry, I was doing one other thing.
No worries.
Cool. Create draft email to
and you can add, if you want, if you're still typing there, you can add in the comments like reminders of what to add. You might also add your bio, a testimonial. I would say add more things right now, and then I'll take things out. But the more things I see, like the more I can be like, oh, this is the thing that's going to be the most enticing. Make sure this is in there, right? So anything you think that might be something that would make someone want to know more about you and like start to follow you, basically, include in that email. And even if it feels super long, doesn't matter. It's gonna be super short eventually, but for now, I want to see everything.
Makes sense.
Cool. That action done? Okay, let's see. So does that answer that side of getting people? Like, this is just one strategy. We can probably come up with more strategies. But does that help with the current problem of getting the conversation started?
Yeah, it's a good start. Cool. And I think the draft will be a good place to head toward.
Cool. So far as actions for you to take, we've got, let me just refresh. I want to see. You're going to create that email. You're going to translate the questions. You still got the other worksheet to go through, part 2. And then practicing it. Like, can you practice, with 3 organizers going through the strategy session thing? Would you, going through the enrollment process? Either with real people or just fake. It could just be like a friend that's willing to practice with you. How do you feel on that?
Yeah, I should be able to do that.
Okay.
Probably would do a combination of like somebody real and a couple of fake people so I can get feedback. Perfect.
That is already in one of your homeworks for due next Saturday, the 6th. Does that sound good? I think that's actually 2 Saturdays from now.
That's 2 Saturdays from now. Yeah, that should be doable.
Okay. Worksheet. So then, looking at like the strategy as a whole, I have it's like an hour-long training that goes over what I call the organizer journey, which is sort of what I was talking about with like this thing where you take them from each stage to become a raving fan. I mean, that's definitely a good thing to go through. We're going to be focusing a little bit more towards the end stuff, I think. But actually, if you go through that, you'll tell me which ones you feel are going to be your biggest struggles, and I'll know. So I would say that's probably a good thing to assign you.
Okay.
Knowing what you have so far, are you ready to take that on over, like, say, the next 2 weeks?
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. Okay. Assign this program. So the video itself is an hour. I'm not sure how I'm going to assign it to you yet because it's not in a worksheet yet. Like, this is the first time I've given this to an individual person to work on. So I'm trying to decide, like, do I just give you the worksheet and just have like a spot for you to ask questions? Is probably, I mean, that will be fast and I can give that to you quickly. So I think that's what I'm going to do, if that's all right, versus like try to create what I did with the other ones where there's a whole bunch of different questions based on different things. I feel like we might need to do that, but let's start with this section and decide if we need to do it based on how you feel. Sound good?
That works for me.
Cool. I think that covers everything I wanted to cover.
There was one thing that we had bookmarked, at least briefly, about have a strategy for getting them to raise their hand and have me contact them.
Have a strategy for you for.
We were talking about like people to reach out to, and you had mentioned like you want to have a strategy for when you reach out to these people, like to get them to raise their hand and say yes, please contact me.
Isn't that what we? Wait, I'm confused because I feel like that's what we just did.
I think it was. I just wanted to like bring that back around and see if there's anything else you wanted to add.
Oh, so I mean, so you've got two different types of people. You got people who don't know you. I will add, like, there's people who don't know you. We mentioned people who you find through the internet. I would also be specific if someone gives you their contact information. Will told me to contact you. Like, so letting them know how you contacted them or how you found them, why you were recommended, something like that. So that might be another scenario. But it's still the same general concept from there is you want to just get interest to be on that list.
Yep.
Can you... I don't know if I mentioned this. Did I mention we'll want to be able to segment people based on their location?
You hadn't mentioned that, but it is a priority for me.
Yeah, okay. So if you do it in a spreadsheet or even if you use a free contact resource, like MailChimp or something, you should be able to like tag people. Yeah. Trying to think if there's a better one than. Yeah.
Yep. One other question that I had was that it seems like a lot of people don't really use email these days, and most people are like living on Facebook. How are you dealing with that?
I mean, so Facebook is a great place to start a conversation. It's a horrible place to do a proposal.
Sure, yeah.
Right? So at the point where I want to do like an actual official proposal with someone, I'm going to transition them to email. Like if they refused for some reason, like that would be weird. I've never had someone refuse. I just say, I'll text them in Facebook or I'll say in Facebook, hey, I'm sending you an email with the proposal, so that but it needs to be set up in a way that looks nice, right? And maybe has a table or graph or something. And so, it needs to be through email.
Yep.
In my experience. You could also talk to them in person like this through Skype and show them things.
Sure. I guess my point is more to like...
to reach out like to someone you'd never met before, or...
Well, no, I mean, like, I'm perfectly fine with just reaching out to a person on Facebook that I've never met before, but the issue, the bigger issue is, like, before you can get through a lot of that, it's like, there's a certain level of commitment before you can get a person's email sometimes.
Yep.
And it's really annoying because you want to be able to manage all of those threads and conversations in a system that is actually more email-based. And so my question was, like, do you have a decent solution for managing all the nonsense that happens on Facebook before you're able to move them over to email?
Gotcha. To some degree, yes. So you can do it. I'm trying to think how. I've never done this for an organizer, but one thing you could do that actually would probably be even more effective if you're willing to maintain it is create I guess it's the same with email. So you could create, instead of asking for emails when you contact people and join my email list, they could join your Facebook group. And again, it still needs to be, it can't be a Facebook group around hiring Andrew, right? That's not going to be sexy enough. It's not going to be like enticing for them to go, ooh, I want to join that group. But if it's around, growing their dance scene or around, what was the other one? Like having students that you love to dance with, right? Whatever it is, like, I'm going to call it your niche, because eventually you want to choose a niche, and then everything's around that. And so when you say, join my Facebook page or Facebook group to learn more about how to make your students so amazing that you love dancing with them, um, everybody that is an organizer that wants that is going to join that group, right? It's in line with their thing. It's a small ask. And now you, instead of emailing tips to them, you just post tips to them, right? You give them tips through that method. Um, and then you can announce things on that group for when you're traveling, as long as it's not too often, right? As long as it's, say, once every like 8 posts, right? 7 posts that are free content, and then 1 post that's something that's around, hey, I'm doing this tour. If you're interested, message me, or you could create a Facebook event around your tour, right? And say, join this Facebook event to pay more attention to it, or obviously getting them on the email list at that point that would be my ideal. But you can hit it with different strategies.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Cool.
Any other questions?
Not right now. No.
Okay. Did you check off the worksheet? Yeah, oh no. There's one outstanding thing that you can check off in your actions. It says go to the worksheets tab and complete your worksheets.
Okay.
You still have worksheets in there, but that one is just in case people don't see the worksheets tab.
Got it.
So it's just to get them to go there.
Cool.
But all your worksheets will have reminders to complete the worksheet. So then you've got your actions, you've got your worksheet. I'm going to assign you another worksheet that will just basically have the video and a place to ask questions. And let me see if there's anything else. Oh, and the niche interviews one. So I'm going to assign you 2 worksheets. One will be the organizer one. Prioritize that for right now.
Mm-hmm.
And then the niche interview one, if you have extra time, go through that.
Yep.
Cool. Shall we set our next session?
Yeah.
Does 2 weeks, same time work? Same day, same time?
Monday will not work.
Okay.
Let's take a look at that week.
Do you want to try to go sooner or later, knowing how much work you have?
Probably later would be good.
Okay. Let's see.
No, my weekends are booked. Probably do Tuesday, though. We'll drop off for some of that. Yeah, let's do Tuesday the 9th. Do you have availability that day?
Let me see.
Or that
October
evening?
9th. Yeah, would same time work for you? Is that a good time?
I think earlier would be better. Like if we could do 5.
Yeah.
Or.
Yep. That.
5:30.
Either is fine.
Let's say 5:30.
Okay. 5:30 on the 9th. Do you want reminders I can give you a 1 day or whatever. I can make it whatever you want, but normally I give a 1 day and a 30-minute.
No, I'll just manage it in Google Calendar once it gets created for me.
Okay. And then I am deleting the reminders for you. One thing to know, I mean, you noticed that this time there's a pre-session check-in. There's also a post-session wrap-up that you'll get assigned right after each session. I recommend don't spend more than 5 or 10 minutes on it. Just really quick thoughts on, your biggest aha or something like that, and any feedback to help improve the process for you so that you get a better session next time.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Do you want an email notification for the date?
Yep.
By the way, I'm not setting this up in Google anymore. I'm setting it up in Coach Accountable.
Sure.
But we already did that once, right? We've already done that. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, we're all set. Oh, wait. Oh, no, yeah, that's fine. It's like, wait, it's scheduling conflict, but it's just a conflict with my normal eating time. I'm one of the things my coach is making me do is schedule my eating times now. She's like, I hate scheduling things. So she's like, all right, at least schedule your eating times and then work around that. And it's been good, but
nice. That's cute.
Yeah. All right. We're good to go. Any last questions?
No, that's all. Thanks, Andrew.
Oh, there was one thing I'm going to mention. I would like us to start a metric. We don't have any metrics yet. The first one that I think would be good is just like general overall happiness factor. Like how you're doing in the mentorship program on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being elated. Like if it gets to a 6 or below, I know I need to like check in and I need to figure out what's going on, right? If it's above a 6, we're going good. And the only thing, like when you get in the metric that I ask is you put a number and then put a little comment why. And the reason for the comment is just over time, we might see like your 10s have a very specific thing that you keep saying over and over when those 10 happen. And, your 6 has this happen. And so then I can understand and go, oh, well, let's make more of this happen and less of this happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Does that make it? Cool. Yep. So I'll assign that metric to you probably later today. And you'll see it. It'll come through. It'll remind you. And you can reply to it. Oh, do you want to reply by text or by email?
Email.
Okay. So to reply to it, you just click reply, put the number, click enter, write the comment, and hit return, and it'll automatically log it.
Cool.
So you don't even need to go into Coach Accountable.
Okay.
But you do need it to be the andrew.southpaw@gmail.com email that you're sending it from.
Okay.
Cool. Awesome. All right. I think we're good.
All right.
All right.
Thank you, Andrew.
You too. See you, Andrew.
See ya.